Elizabeth I, the badass Tudor queen who defied all expectations. Some monarchs inherit a throne, others have to fight for it. And then there was Elizabeth Tudor, a woman who not only fought for her throne but transformed it into the foundation of modern England, all while being told she couldn't possibly succeed because she was just a woman. Hello, history lovers. Today we're diving into the remarkable story of Elizabeth I, arguably the most badass queen who ever lived, and a woman who rewrote the rules of power in a world ruled by men. Elizabeth's story begins not with a silver spoon, but with a death sentence hanging over her head. Born in 1533 to Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn, her mother was beheaded when Elizabeth was just 2 years old, and she was declared illegitimate. Imagine starting life as a princess, then being demoted to the king's bastard before you can even form memories. Her childhood was a masterclass in survival. With her status constantly changing under her father and then her half-brother Edward's reign, Elizabeth learned early that knowledge was power. She became fluent in 6 languages, studied history, theology, and philosophy, all while living under the constant threat of execution or imprisonment. When her Catholic half-sister Mary took the throne, Elizabeth was thrown in the Tower of London on suspicion of supporting Protestant rebels. Many expected her to lose her head, just like her mother. But here's where Elizabeth's genius first showed itself. Rather than fighting back, she played the part of the dutiful, innocent sister. She wore simple clothes, carried a prayer book, and projected an image of harmlessness. This wasn't weakness. It was strategic brilliance. She understood that sometimes appearing non-threatening was the best way to survive. When Mary died in 1558, Elizabeth ascended to the throne at age 25, inheriting a nation torn apart by religious conflict, nearly bankrupt, and vulnerable to invasion from more powerful European kingdoms. The odds were stacked against her. Most expected her to quickly marry so a man could take over the actual governing. Elizabeth had other plans. In one of history's greatest power moves, she transformed what everyone saw as her greatest weakness, being a woman, into her greatest strength. She declared herself married to England, creating the persona of the Virgin Queen. This brilliant strategy let her use marriage negotiations as diplomatic bargaining chips without ever giving away her power. For over 40 years, she dangled the prospect of marriage to various European princes, keeping potential enemies at bay and creating powerful alliances, all while maintaining complete independence. When the Spanish ambassador implied she was too inexperienced to rule alone, she famously replied, "I know I have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king, and of a king of England too." This wasn't just a sick burn. It was a calculated message that while she acknowledged gender expectations, she would not be bound by them. Elizabeth's religious policy was equally masterful. Following the violent religious swings between Protestantism under her brother and Catholicism under Mary, England was a powder keg waiting to explode. Rather than continuing the cycle of persecution, Elizabeth established a moderate Protestant church with Catholic elements, creating what became known as the Elizabethan religious settlement. She famously declared she had no desire to make windows into men's souls, meaning she wouldn't persecute people for their private beliefs as long as they showed outward conformity. This pragmatic approach prevented the kind of religious wars that devastated France and other European countries during the same period. Then, there was her handling of the Spanish Armada in 1588, perhaps her most badass moment. When King Philip II of Spain sent what was considered an invincible fleet to invade England, Elizabeth didn't cower. She rode to Tilbury to address her troops in person, wearing armor and carrying the sword of state. "I know I have the body of a weak and feeble woman," she told them, "but I have the heart and stomach of a king, and of a king of England too." The English Navy's subsequent defeat of the Spanish Armada wasn't just a military victory. It was a personal triumph for Elizabeth, establishing England as a major naval power and securing her reputation as a leader who could stand against the mightiest king in Europe. What makes Elizabeth truly exceptional wasn't just her survival or her political savvy. It was her understanding of image and propaganda. In an age without mass media, she created one of history's most successful personal brands. Her portraits were carefully controlled state documents, showing her bedecked in pearls, symbolizing virginity, and surrounded by symbols of power and wisdom. She transformed her elaborate gowns, wigs, and makeup into tools of statecraft, presenting herself as almost superhuman. The Eternal Virgin, England's protector, a queen who combined feminine grace with masculine authority. Her famous Armada portrait, painted after the Spanish defeat, shows her hand resting on a globe, specifically over the New World, a not-so-subtle message about England's growing imperial ambitions. This was a queen who understood that perception often matters more than reality. Elizabeth's court became a center of cultural brilliance during what we now call the Elizabethan age. Shakespeare, Marlowe, and Spenser produced works that remain pillars of English literature. English explorers, like Drake and Raleigh, extended England's reach across the globe. The foundations were laid for what would eventually become the British Empire. But perhaps most impressive was Elizabeth's ability to maintain power in a world where women rulers were considered unnatural. Other female monarchs of the era, like Mary Queen of Scots and Lady Jane Grey, lost their heads. Elizabeth not only survived, but thrived for 44 years on the throne. Her methods weren't always what we'd consider ethical today. She maintained a fearsome intelligence network under her spy master, Sir Francis Walsingham. She could be ruthless when necessary, as when she reluctantly signed the execution warrant for her cousin Mary Queen of Scots after years of plots against her. She delayed making decisions until the last possible moment, driving her advisors to distraction. Yet, even her harshest critics had to admire her statecraft. When she died in 1603, she left a transformed England, stronger, more united, more prosperous, and positioned to become a world power in the coming centuries. Elizabeth Athari wasn't just badass because she ruled successfully as a woman in a man's world, though that alone would qualify her. She was badass because she rewrote the rules of the game entirely. She turned perceived weaknesses into strengths. She outmaneuvered enemies with vastly more resources. She understood the power of image 4 centuries before Instagram. And she did it all while maintaining the loyalty and admiration of her people. In her final speech to Parliament, known as the Golden Speech, Elizabeth said, "Though God has raised me high, yet this I count the glory of my crown, that I have reigned with your loves." It was a fitting summary of a monarch who understood that true power comes not just from divine right or military might, but from the hearts of those you lead. Elizabeth I, Tudor queen, strategic genius, and perhaps the most brilliantly badass woman ever to wear a crown. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this exploration of Elizabeth's remarkable reign, be sure to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below.